say we had like 40 or 50 people all singing along. I mean, it was a thing. And it felt so good to just have that moment where we weren't complaining. We weren't angry that we were standing in the mud or in the heat, and we weren't grousing about the parade. Instead, we were having a moment.
Bienvenue. Welcome to Coffee Talk with King Francois I, where we will discover the tales, trials, and talents of Renaissance Festival performers, merchants, and die-hard attendees as we journey by way of light-hearted and even at times heartwarming conversations about the Renaissance Festival world. I am your host, Theodore Jander, aka King Francois I. Bonjour. Welcome to Coffee Talk with King Francois I, episode 32. I am your host, Theodore Jander. In this Coffee Talk, you will hear the remainder of my conversation with Douglas Carr, a longtime friend and former creative director of the St. Louis Renaissance Festival. As mentioned in the last episode, due to the original length of the conversation between Douglas and me lasting nearly 3 hours, I split it up between 2 episodes. Before we continue, a word from this episode's sponsor, Mid-America Festivals, with one of their upcoming events, the St. Louis Kegs and Eggs. Have a hopping good time at the largest adult egg hunt in the St. Louis area. Thousands of dollars of cash and prizes and 15,000 eggs are up for grabs. Come meet Bud Bunny and enjoy samplings of locally crafted beers, spirits, and even non-alcoholic drinks, live entertainment by Threshold, food trucks, a live DJ, and exciting games and contests aplenty. Everyone receives a t-shirt, tote bag, and a sample glass with their ticket. You can even bring your dog to join in the fun with their very own egg hunt and contests. Join us Saturday, April 13th, 2024 on the grounds of the St. Louis Renaissance Festival in Wentzville, Missouri. The pre-party begins at 11 a.m. with the egg hunt at 1 p.m. Various tickets are available at stlrenfest.com. Thank you to Mid-America Festivals for their sponsorship of this episode and for making the following excellent offer available to you, my listeners. To receive a Kegs and Eggs designated driver ticket valued at $35, be one of the first 10 listeners to sign up for a 7-day free trial of the Cafe Latte's Noble Recognition tier on the Coffee Talk with King Francois I podcast Patreon page. The link to sign up is included in the show notes along with the aforementioned event information. Without further ado, we now jump into Douglas's and my conversation about 33 seconds before the cliffhanger ending of the last installment. So, grab a cup of your favorite Java, sit back, and enjoy this episode of Coffee Talk with King Francois I.
So it helps the understanding of what my character is based on how I react and vice versa.
And you should be given credit for it, Ted. Your portrayal, at least for as long as I've known you, has always been that. While you can, on one hand, affect the grandeur and the stature, the gravitas, if you will, of the King of France, you also are able to, how do I want to say it? Because you don't humble yourself to get on their level. You raise them up. And what it shows is it shows your respect for the performer.
Thank you.
And I don't know if it's something that you did on purpose or it is just naturally how it's wound up. But that is a fear often with people who play a part of high stature. It's very easy to come off as, just a terrible person. And you never have.
Right.
You are able to do that. And as I said, it's not that King Francois comes down to their level. King Francois elevates them for whatever period of time they have that interaction. So there still is for the audience, and I've seen you as an audience member, for the audience, there is still that separation, but you are able to authentically move through it for the sake of the show.
Yeah.
To respect your colleague while still keeping the masquerade in place.
Right.
As a creative director, I never had to worry that you were being cruel to any of the other players ever. It was never a concern. And I knew that you could play it the way you should, including the distance between the characters on one hand, but also your ability to invite them in with warmth for whatever purposes as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, you do that well.
Well, thank you. Thank you. There are times when I don't necessarily feel like I have, but that's also the nature too of this kind of performing. This topic has come up in multiple conversations within or for the podcast, as well as in general. And each organization is going to have its own community and its own pros, its own cons, etc. But when you look at similar types of things, in a lot of ways, Renaissance festivals are probably far more like a movie set versus a staged play.
Okay.
In that, yes, there's a potentially that we have these characters, whether fictional or real. Yeah, you have that on a stage show, on a stage in a theater. We have lines that we learn. We're rehearsed. We do some character development. We may have had an experience of going through things. I remember Ariel sharing an experience she had, I think, when she was in school, of learning the intensity of just a single word that you would be saying on stage and the work that goes into that. Yeah, there are similarities, but we are like a movie set it's a little world. Granted, nowadays there's probably a lot more CGI world, so it's a big green or blue, whatever. There's a lot of stuff that's made without all that. But the interactions that the extras, that the actors, it's all intended to be, they're all interacting. Granted, there are a whole lot of other people that you don't see. And yes, there are similarities, but the Renaissance festivals are so unique in that it is theater, but it's also in some ways, I don't want to say it is movies because you sit and watch a movie. But as far as the participants go, you're interacting with every single person around you. And it's its own thing. And it has come up. There is that fourth wall in staged performances. I experienced that recently, having been on stage again after a lot of years. That audience isn't there.
Right.
All of the interaction is what's happening on stage. And that's where there is a difference between a movie set and Ren Fair.
So you're saying that largely Ren Fair doesn't have that fourth wall.
Correct.
And everyone in your area is inside the show.
Yeah. It's the nature of what it is. You have those kind of staged performances at Renaissance festivals that people come out, they do a show, and then they're backstage.
Yes.
And that's fine. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that at all because they're part of the ambiance of what was going on. There are benefits. It has its place because it is entertainment. There are people that do come to Renaissance fairs and they're like, don't talk to me. They do not want to be talked to. They don't want to be looked at. They don't want to. And that's absolutely fine because there are some days when I'm like that when I go to the store. I'm like, don't talk to me. I'm like, I have to check out, but don't talk to me because I'm just not in that headspace. But it's almost this, for lack of a better term, marriage of different entertainment worlds.
Okay.
Pulled into one because you take the pure stage performance where you do have an audience that's watching. And everything that's happening on stage is the interactions are all between just the people on stage. There's no interaction with the audience. Whereas at a Renaissance festival, you're going to have some of these people on stage, but they're interacting. I guarantee you they're interacting with the audience.
They need to. That's the success of the show.
Right.
The more you're able to pull the audience into whatever's going on, the better the show.
Oh, absolutely.
more fun you have as a performer, the more fun they have as patrons.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's the lifeblood.
And I don't know of any other kind of venue that allows for that allows for some of the conversations, the events that have taken place, the memories that have been experienced. I won't go into the memory that was shared on a recent episode that aired. They're only things that you will hear at a Renaissance Festival.
Yes, absolutely. I wish I could remember some of the ones.
Oh, yeah.
You're absolutely right.
And I can't think of another venue where that's even possible.
When you create a stage show for the Renaissance Fair, and so we're going to take it from the whole thing to just a stage show. If you're not thinking about how to get the audience involved, if you're not thinking about how at every step you are pulling the audience in, you're not going to entertain anybody. You will not build a following. And if you're doing it for money, you're not going to make any.
Yeah.
It is the show.
Mm-hmm.
When I became involved in the St. Louis Renaissance Fair, it seemed like some of the direction it had gone was, for some people, there seemed to be the idea of bringing the audience in was, if not forbidden, it just wasn't the goal.
Mm-hmm.
And we changed that. We changed it. And I imagine there's probably lots of people who could argue with me, but I would say we change it for the better, because when I go to a fair as a patron, if I can walk the whole site without somebody trying to drag me into something, I'm not having fun.
Mm-hmm.
If the only interaction I have is people at a booth trying to sell me something and the players in the streets let me walk by, I mean, you obviously can't reach out to everyone who comes by.
Right.
But if I walk an entire circuit and players are not trying to bring me into something, I'm not having fun.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering where it is. Why, you know what I mean? That's
absolutely
one of the things I go to a fair for.
Yeah.
Because like you said, I can't think of a venue where that is such a big part of what happens.
Yeah. And I know that there are people who come to Renaissance festivals and their intent is to walk around and look at all the people dressed up and be judging every single person like you are nuts for what you're doing.
Yes.
And you just read it. You can just see it in their body language and everything else. Although I guess I could be wrong, because I could be jumping to conclusions. Maybe they need to have had that engagement of like, oh my gosh, the King of France just talked to me.
And that's true for many. There are many people who do go and they would have done more, interacted more, maybe even have become a player at some point. But if nobody ever talks to them, they don't really see the magic of it.
Yeah.
So what I used to tell the cast, and I don't know if you remember, but what I used to tell the cast is, I know you're not going to be able to talk to everyone. But as long as we know that everyone was talked to at least by someone.
Right.
You know what I mean? The problem for you, I would guess, having never been the king, I don't know, being that character, you probably draw more attention than, a peasant.
Right.
So trying to make it through a crowd, I could see where it could be very daunting.
Yeah.
What I always just say is that we succeeded or we failed together. We put on a great show or we forgot our lines together, however it went. My hope always was that if we had bought into it, if we had been successful in creating a community that was putting on a show that day where everyone felt like they were a part of it, then I wouldn't have to worry that you didn't speak to that person, because I knew somebody was going to get there.
Yeah.
That you're going to talk to somebody, if not right then and there, soon.
Yeah.
There's no other way to do it. Like you said, even if you did try to speak to every patron that came through, you wouldn't be able to make that distance. You'd be stuck in a place for a long time.
Yeah. As we reflect on the history of our experiences, we've already shared a couple of stories, and having been involved for as long as both of us have with Renaissance festivals, I've experienced a lot of memorable encounters with patrons, with cast, guest performers, directors, etc. What are some of, or what's one of your favorite memories you would like to share with my listeners and me?
I've got a lot of them.
Yeah.
Here's a quick one. Okay, you got to understand this was the late 80s, early 90s.
Okay.
And so it was a little bit of a different world. And it was a Southern California Pleasure Fair. My second year at fair, I was helping a friend out at his booth. He was running a catapult game booth.
Okay.
Where they had these really great, really well-made little historical catapults, and they would fire into targets to win things. And toward the end of the day, one of the things that the fair had is they had a scavenger hunt, several different scavenger hunts that would go through. And toward the end of the day, a couple comely young ladies had come by and had, they only had a couple things on their list to go. And I looked through the list and there was something that I could give them. And I'm glad that we're not in person because I don't know if I could tell you this in person, but they needed a pair of purple bloomers, if you will.
Okay.
And it just so happened that I had been wearing purple bloomers underneath my kilt that day. And so I gave them to them. And you could certainly be wondering, how do you take a strange man's skivvies?
Right.
And just walk off with them. But it was another world. It was another year. I don't know. Alcohol was involved.
Yeah.
And I'll change the names to protect the innocent. Favorite memories. If you remember one of the first scenarios that we did that I wrote, it was another one of ringing the bell to open the fair.
Yes.
This was the one where we had Johnny Boger firing a pistol from the hilltop, aimed down the hill at a bell in a bell tower not too far from where you were. What was fun about that, so Ariel was sitting, if you remember, she's sitting with her legs dangling outside of the bell tower. And the idea was he would fire, she would fly backwards as if she were hit or something, and the bell would ring. What was really fun about that is had she really fallen back into the bell tower, she would have fallen about, 8 or 10 feet and probably ended up with concussion.
Yeah.
So while all the show was going on, I was inside the bell tower, like almost spread eagle, acting as a human net to catch her. When she fell backwards, she actually landed on me, and I kept her from falling to the ground, which was kind of fun.
I did. Oh my gosh.
So it was low-tech solution. One of those things that I think people would have thought was just crazy. There had to be an easier way to do it. For some reason, that's a favorite memory.
Wow, I never knew that.
But see?
Oh, there you go.
But I think I'll tell you my most favorite memory, and it really wasn't for patrons, I don't think. It was for us. So the Grand Parade didn't seem to be anybody's favorite thing.
Right.
It was one of those things that we always complained about, or people always complained about. And of course, one of the big problems of it was lineup. People would start showing up, significantly early because they got out of responsibilities that way. We'd be around in the gully, right in the mud, for quite a while, sometimes in the heat, waiting for the parade to take off. And I guess all of my favorite stories really have to do with me, so please forgive me.
No, how else would they not be your stories if you're not involved?
Because there are a lot of things other people did that meant a lot to me, but this was my favorite story. And so I was always one to try to do something when it seemed like the cast was bored. And I started singing Rattlin' Bog. I don't know if you remember. And I started singing it, and there were a lot of groans because, of course, it had been directed. This was before I was the creative director. We had been basically told to sing the Rattlin' Bog whenever we needed to do something. And a lot of people weren't very happy with that. So I start singing it, and I start making up my own verses, and I'm making up the verses to bring people in and try to get interest and whatever. And before long, I want to say we had like 40 or 50 people all singing along. I mean, it was a thing, and it felt so good to just have that moment where we weren't complaining. We weren't angry that we were standing in the mud or in the heat, and we weren't grousing about the parade. Instead, we were having a moment. We were sharing something that, I don't know, just felt good at the time.
Yeah.
And I mean, I still remember that. It was never able to duplicate it, but it was, for me, it was a high point.
Yeah.
Because you could see the community.
Yeah.
You could feel it. And to me, it was a justification for why we were, why did we put in so many hours or so many dollars doing something that we seem to be so frustrated about? And for me, it felt It felt really good.
Brilliant. That's what it's about. It's that community. And that if it had that much of an impact on you, I mean, it is important. I'm glad you were able to have that moment, because I think when you are in a leadership role, it can be challenging.
It can.
Even though it was before you were creative director, you had been a big part of what was going on.
I had been writing the scenario for a couple of years, and I was directing that part of the show. So I was doing things.
Yeah. But to have taken something that tended to leave a bad taste in most everybody's mouths who were doing it, and that parade was a thing, you changed that, even though it was for a moment. And that's cool.
Appreciate it. Yeah.
So for memories and creating memories for others, and when you talk about patrons coming in, and we've talked about your introduction to the Renaissance Festival world and with the different casts and merchants, etc., for people considering becoming a performer, joining a cast, becoming an artisan that either demonstrates or sells their craft, merchants, or even attending the fair, what is the best piece of advice you can offer?
I used to tell people, especially new people who join cast, I would tell them that being a part of a Renaissance fair was a lot like being a drug addict, because you spent your weekends, typically wouldn't smell very good. You'd come home dirty, exhausted, and your money was always gone, and your family was worried about you.
You're not creating a good picture. Oh, go on.
But honestly, I would tell someone who is interested to be open to the possibility, because the fair can be, I mean, if you wanted to go for a narrow experience, there were people who volunteered to do our backstage labor, if you remember, part of the Orange Guild, and that's all they wanted. They didn't want to be in costume or be on stage or to do any of that. They just wanted to schlep water and trash all day. And they were happy with that. And if that's what you want, that's fine. But be open to the possibilities, because you could find what you're looking for, or you could find something even more. You didn't expect, I imagine, to be King Francois at this fair for the better part of 25 years. And I'm sure when you started, you didn't realize the effect that you playing that character and that character surviving for so long, what effect that would have on the community, on the patron, on the merchants. Everyone knows you.
Right.
And you have been a part of their lives. I look at something like that similar to like being a teacher. A teacher touches so many lives every year, depending on what grade level you teach. Everyone in the community knows who you are.
Right.
Because you were, and they remember that for years. I'm sure you can remember many of the teachers that you've had.
Yeah.
But now think of the thousands of people, probably hundreds of thousands, but I don't want your head to get too big. But the thousands of people who either came to fair as players, as merchants, as artisans, as guest acts, as patrons, who know you for your contributions to this community, to this organism for, again, the better part of 25 years. You talk about your predecessor with reverence, but that's on one hand kind of silly because your history with the character has so far outstripped anything that person did.
Yeah.
And that was big. You may never be invited to put have a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, but there are thousands of people throughout the St. Louis area and beyond who know you, who will remember you as the King of France. And that's special. And that's an experience that not everybody gets to have. And that is the possibility.
Yeah.
For anybody who wants to be a part of fair.
One, rather speechless. Thank you to hear that. I'm humbled very much. I never really, wow. Yeah. Two, you're absolutely right. When I joined, I was really kind of doing it for me because I had this interest and to learn about the significance of potentially impacting other people's lives and entertaining. And that's always been a thing that I've enjoyed doing. But it is that being open to what it is that you're walking into, even as a patron or a patron, being open to this world. You're walking through gates. You're crossing a bridge. Honestly, even if it's a pirate festival, if it's a Viking festival, if it's a fantasy or fairy oriented festival, there are similarities to that as you walk into it with an open mind about the possibility. I would say that the majority, if not all of our cast has come from people who have attended a Renaissance festival. Usually. Samantha and Taylor Kreitz, they joined last year. They had never been to a Renaissance festival. They went to Central Missouri Renaissance Festival in the spring of 2022, and they ended up on the cast of the St. Louis Renaissance Festival. And it was because someone heard her singing. It's possible that she was a patron before, but back in 2021, we had a new cast member who character name is Gilly, played Penny Whistle, I think. Yeah. Anyway, she joined as kind of that character and then became a part of one of the best up and coming groups.
Wonderful.
And so to have that, and if you go in with, I'm just going to do this one little thing, and not to dismiss that because people are in their life experiences can determine that, but that's been a common thing, is that openness. Be open. You're encouraged to be open. If you're closed-minded, fine. I mean, that's you. You can go to a Renaissance Festival and be closed-minded. That's totally within their right to do. Mm-hmm. If you are someone who wants to experience potentially more, possessing an open mind to it is the only way that it can really happen.
Yes.
Even if it's just a little crack in the door that's just barely open, enough of that light will I never thought about it that way.
If you remember, I used to teach the cast when to talk to patrons and to take whatever the patron gives them, to take it and to build from it, to use that. Mm. And the idea to me was that was opening themselves up to being able to interact. Mm-hmm. Because we all probably have those memories too of a patron that has done something, said something that touched us in some way. Anybody who's done this for any period of time, you've got those patrons that have been special because of what they've said and done. And it's had an effect on you, on us, on how we even continue from there. If you remember, I used to thank everybody every day. On the way out, I'd thank everybody. And usually what I get from somebody was, I'm just doing what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm just doing my job. But you were doing it. Mm-hmm. Thanking them was not just to give them gratitude. I mean, I was grateful for every person who was there, but it was also giving them that opportunity. They had something to say. It was that opportunity for somebody to speak to me if they wanted to. Mm-hmm. And it happened many times that saying thank you to somebody on our way out at the end of the day gave somebody an opportunity to talk to me about something that I had no ideas about.
Yeah.
Helped me try to stay on top of communication.
Yeah, I know that's something that I've learned a lot, especially in the past almost 4 years, of the massive, massive, massive importance of communication and the importance or the power, the absolute power that words have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is playing at a Renaissance fair, being a part of a Renaissance fair it's not static. Mm-mm. It shouldn't be static. It should be constantly growing. Mm-hmm. I don't mean growing size, growing buildings, growing fatter.
Right.
But it's a constant opportunity to experience what's next.
Yes.
Within the borders of that pocket of reality. Mm-hmm. And you get from it what you want to get from it.
Yeah.
But if you're open to the possibilities, you can get so much more.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's an encouragement there that you will encounter from other cast, from artisans, from merchants, from performers. That encouragement is there. They want for you to succeed. They don't want to see you fail. They want to potentially help you along the way.
Yes.
We want this to be comfortable for you. We don't want this to be uncomfortable for you. How can we make this experience better for you? And it goes so far as to those who are even just attending, making that person who walks through the gates welcome, regardless of the color of their skin, the clothes, the color of their eyes, their accent, whether or not they can speak English fluently, if they're from another country and they have someone they're struggling with how to communicate with someone who's physically challenged to be able to navigate that. Every single human being, from the infant, I've seen infants out there, to the elderly, extreme elderly. We've had the whole range of people, that every single one of those people is welcome.
Yes.
And that can be a tall order.
Yes.
That can be a tough thing, especially when you have thousands of people walking through that gate. But that's also, in essence, what we signed up for.
If that is the goal that everyone buys into, my strategy was to make you all feel appreciated and to make sure you all felt like you had a place.
Right.
Because ideally that then translates from the player to the patron. I have a place, you have a place. That's how you keep your gates open. That's how you keep customers coming back. That's how a Renaissance fair thrives.
Yeah.
I would say that people who are typically a part of a Renaissance fair are kind of a special breed, typically open to certain types of entertainment, science fiction, fantasy, certain genres of movies or other things. We usually share Monty Python jokes and whatever.
Oh,
And I mean, that's a language that I think patrons at every Renaissance fair across the country speak. Many of us may not feel very comfortable in the outside world. Many of us may not feel very comfortable being ourselves with others that don't understand us or are just different. The goal is to get the community that puts on a fair to recognize and accept everyone else. Because that creates an environment that is welcoming, like you said, that is warm for the patron to come into. I never wanted a patron to see our fair as a shopping mall with people with funny costumes. Because then they're just going to come in and buy what they want and leave.
Right.
And then you have to wonder, why is there a cast at all?
Yeah.
I wanted them to come to our fair, feel like it's worthwhile to spend some time here. It's worthwhile to put everything else aside and hang out. And I'm going to see some things that I don't see every day. I'm going to watch some shows that I definitely don't get to see every day. I'm going to talk to some people about some subjects that might be very interesting to me or I might know nothing about. But again, I don't have every day. I want the patron to feel like that's worth their time. And how else do you do that without having a cast that recognizes the value of that kind of interaction?
Outstanding. That is an outstanding way to, I would say, conclude at least the presented portion of the episode, as I'm sure we could we could probably just keep talking. My rear end is getting tired.
No worries.
It's been way long overdue. One, for you and I to sit and talk, but the fact of being able to talk about something that I think both of us have a great passion for. Thank you, Douglas, so much for taking the time out of your day for this.
No problem. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Douglas, may the rest of your day and the rest of your week be filled with Renaissance merriment and many blessings to you in your craft. And again, thank you so much for taking the time.
Gramercy, thank you. I really appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
I do hope you enjoyed this episode and the conclusion of my conversation with my guest, Douglas Carr. And I will add that with the beginning of the 2024 season for the St. Louis Renaissance Festival, and as the cast director, the conversations Douglas and I had have been tremendously beneficial and a real blessing as we move forward with building the cast and preparing for a wonderful new season. To hear bonus material from my chat with Douglas, I invite you to join the wonderful community of listeners supporting the show and making new things possible through Patreon. You can also receive early access to each new episode, as well as receive a behind-the-scenes glimpse into the production and creative process for the podcast. Learn more at www.patreon.com/Coffee Talk with King Francois. Be on the lookout for the next installment. If you are a performer, artisan, merchant, staff, or diehard patron in or of the Renaissance Festival world and would like to be featured on Coffee Talk with King Francois Premier, reach out to me by way of clicking on the following link provided in the show notes: www.theodorejander.com/Coffee Talk Podcast. Thank you all so much for tuning in to Coffee Talk with King Francois Premier. A bientôt, see you soon, ciao for now, and au revoir.